Greetings from San Diego, California. This interactive multinational teleconference is reaching you live in English and Spanish through a unique and complex telecommunications network via satellite, microwave, and cable. This program brings together distinguished institutions representing education, business, and government in more than a dozen countries in the Americas and Europe. I'm Professor Peter Anderson from the School of Communication here at San Diego State University. During today's program, the second program in this year's IT series of video conferences, we will be discussing the trends and protocols of our globalized environment and markets and these challenges that they present for organizational synchronization. Globalization has been lauded as the engine of the world economy, with hope for vast new markets for products from around the world. Globalization has also been blamed for the loss of jobs in America, exploitation of workers in the third world, and even global environmental destruction. No one can dispute the fact that globalization is reshaping the world. It is creating new economic, social, and political trends that affect the traditional protocols of behavior in education, business, government, and civil society around the world. Organizations throughout the world are finding brand new markets for their products and new competitors that create a dizzying economic environment where the only constant is change. And the rate of change is exponential, so adaptation is increasingly intense, costly, and difficult. New knowledge and technologies must be absorbed at a pace never before imagined, and broader human and emotional competencies must now be developed at all levels to be able to collaborate more effectively and achieve the desired goals in a shrinking global marketplace. This strategic video conference will discuss the importance of recognizing global and regional trends and traditions to meet the challenges of organizational synchronization in the rapidly changing environment we all face today. In this environment, organizations will invariably be required to benchmark and strategize based on their anticipation of relevant economic, social, and political indicators. The approach and methodology of organizational synchronization offers an ideal framework to accomplish this, provided a culture of creative scenarios and new alliances can be developed. Our distinguished invited speaker will propose practical guidelines and exercises to implement this process, guiding you and your organization on a new path of adaptive exuberance, leading to a permanently synchronized and internal and external environment. Continuous proactive rather than reactive change is now feasible through the implementation of this dynamic synchronization approach. We are delighted to have with us today Dr. Stephen Goldstein, author, lecturer, television personality, columnist, and consultant to non-profit and for-profit organizations. Dr. Stephen Goldstein is president and CEO of Educational Marketing Services Incorporated, a company he founded in 1977. He's a nationally recognized marketing, communications, and fundraising executive, as well as a trends analyst and forecaster. His company's network of consulting professionals provides expertise in fundraising, communications, marketing, advertising, and market research, analysis and strategy that enhances the success and organizational effectiveness of government agencies, nonprofit organizations, public policy institutes, professional associations, and for-profit businesses. Currently, Dr. Goldstein writes a bi-weekly editorial column for the South Florida Sun-Sentinel. He is author of the books 30 Days to Successful Fundraising, which has just been published, and You Can't Go Wrong by Doing Right, 50 Principles for Running a Successful Business, both published by PSI Research. He is also a widely published author of articles ranging from education and politics to the economy and trends, which have appeared in leading publications. International in scope and appeal, Dr. Goldstein's articles have been translated into Spanish and published throughout Latin America. Dr. Goldstein is also the producer and host of We the People, a half-hour general interest and public affairs TV interview program, and host for the program Teen Talk. Dr. Goldstein was also the producer of the award-winning South Florida aired program, The Business Exchange. Stephen Goldstein earned his bachelor's, master's, and Ph.D. degrees from Columbia University. Welcome, Dr. Goldstein. The Wall Street Journal published an important article on its front page last week which referred to Nestle's flat food sales in recent years and its late interest on healthier foods, quoting that global sales for nutritionally enhanced foods have been exploding since 1998 from 28 billion to an estimated 48 billion in 2004, and yet Nestle is just beginning to catch on. Is this an illustration of the need to dynamically synchronize our organizations to keep up with trends? Does that mean that synchronization is very expensive or difficult for large organizations to achieve? And what about for governments?
Well, the short answers to your questions are yes, no, and yes. Unless you want to go out of business, you should synchronize, as is clear. It's always surprising to think of a large organization waking up to a trend. And during my discussion a little later, I will point out a number of them that have woken up so late that they went out of business. The second point is that it doesn't have to be expensive. People have eyes and ears, and there are all kinds of ways to get information, so I hope that our viewers will understand that their access to information is there.
Right. And how about government?
Government is, in fact, it's important for government as well as for for-profit business to open up their eyes and to synchronize.
Okay, well, thank you for your excellent insights. Let's begin with Module 1 of today's program.
Today, we're going to discuss synchronization, the crucial concept and process for the success of every organization and individual. It is so crucial that I would go so far as to say that if your organization is not synchronized, it will not succeed in light of the demands of today's global marketplace. For-profit businesses, non-governmental agencies, and governments must be synchronized, especially governments, as they face the changing social and economic conditions of the communities they serve. Even if your organization appears to operate within a very limited local sphere, it needs to be synchronized. In the next few minutes, I'm going to ask you to answer 5 questions. So please be sure that you have paper and a pen or pencil. Now, imagine an organization that knows exactly what the people it serves need and want at all times, and that is organized perfectly to provide those products and services. Imagine it as an equation. Organization equals environment equals organization. The inside of such an organization is perfectly aligned with the world outside it, and vice versa. Inside and outside are in total harmony. Moreover, as the world outside the organization changes, which it inevitably will, it is so well tuned that it can change appropriately. It always sees how to modify its existing products and services to keep up with market demand. In addition, it can even anticipate changes in the marketplace before they occur. More importantly, It is willing and able internally to change, to reinvent itself, to keep up with new and emerging trends and needs. So it is flexible enough to be able at all times to offer precisely the new products and services that its audiences want and need. I asked you to imagine an organization in which external and internal are so well balanced because it is a perfect model. It is the ideal that every organization should try to achieve. As you might have suspected, it is the model of a totally synchronized organization. Now, I'm going to ask you to answer a few questions, all of which relate to how close you think your organization comes to the model I just described. If you don't currently work in an organization, rate one that you know of. So here's question 1. How well does your organization know exactly what the people it serves need and want? Rate it from 1 to 5, with 5 being the best. And now for question 2. How well does your organization provide the products and services the people it serves need and want? Again, rate it from 1 to 5. Are you ready for question 3? How well does your organization change to serve the needs of its markets? Rate it from 1 to 5, with 5 being the best. No matter how you rated your organization from 1 to 5, even if it scored perfect 5s, its ability to synchronize itself can always be enhanced. In fact, the underlying principle of synchronization is that you can never rest on your laurels. You never become synchronized once and for all. You are always being synchronized. You never stop. You must keep at it. It is a dynamic process. That's why today we're going to discuss how you can develop dynamic synchronization, the process of implementing and re-implementing synchronization, tuning and fine-tuning your organization. It is the key to success. I guarantee it. Just in case you have any doubt that synchronization is powerful and crucial to your success, let me prove it right now. History is filled with examples of empires, countries, companies, individuals, and species that appeared, even thrived, but then fell apart or disappeared. The common thread that runs through each of their failures is that at some point they became out of touch, detached, frozen in time, rigid, inflexible, unable to adapt, and so they died out. Think about it. Dinosaurs that once freely roamed the world died out when they couldn't adapt to Ice Age conditions. The Roman Empire ruled the world, but then overextended itself, became out of touch, and was destroyed. And though such misfortunes may seem extreme and remote, every day you can read about another dinosaur of an organization or corporate empire that is having serious problems, even going out of business, because it didn't adapt to changing external conditions. For example, recently, Kraft Foods showed that it hasn't been as well synchronized as it should have been. The world's second largest food company announced major job cuts and plant closings. About 6,500 employees in North America alone are supposed to lose their jobs. Kraft has more than 60 brands like Kraft Cheese, Maxwell House Coffee, Nabisco Cookies and Crackers, and Post cereals. It's a corporate giant. Each of its brands has sales of more than $100 million in 150 countries. It has 218 processing facilities worldwide. With so much at stake, you would expect a company so big to have had its finger on the pulse of its markets. But, obviously, it didn't. So, what went wrong at Kraft? It appears at least two things. First, it seems that it was out of touch with its local markets around the world and slow to respond to changing local conditions. Its new CEO said as much when he talked about the future direction of Kraft. In becoming more global, we must keep and strengthen the local expertise that has built our success. We can begin to capture the best of global and best of local and act with greater focus and speed than ever before. That tells me that in his estimation, Kraft may have mistakenly opted for a one-size-fits-all approach. In other words, trying to sell the same products globally without taking different local tastes into account. Kraft also seems to have ignored a major trend in healthful eating. It appears to be downsizing, at least in part, because it failed to keep up with changing market demands for low-fat, low-cholesterol foods. Foolishly, restaurants, grocery stores, and food producers have ignored consumers' growing concern with healthful eating. They thought people would never change their habits. So they lived in denial that they would have to change their product offerings. While consumers in different parts of the world have been altering their diets, traditional food companies refused to meet their needs. So, a subculture of health food companies has grown and grown. Now, healthful eating has become mainstream in many areas. So now, health food companies offer major competition to traditional companies that wouldn't change. A little late, traditional companies have to catch up. Do you see how easy it is to stop being synchronized and why companies so easily fall into that trap? So now for question 4. How well does your organization identify important emerging trends? Rate it on the same 1 to 5 scale, with 5 as the best. Another example of major companies and a whole industry becoming dinosaurs or out of synchronization can be seen in film-based photography. In other words, the way most people used to take pictures. Some companies didn't wake up to the huge emerging trend in digital photography until it was too late. So, companies that were asleep have lost customers, as more and more consumers see no reason to use a film camera anymore. It's ironic, but the digital revolution in photography killed Polaroid, the company that years ago started a revolution in photography. It introduced the camera that took pictures instantly back in 1947, but declared bankruptcy in 2001. It didn't see the trend coming that would kill its business. Eastman Kodak, the big photographic company, has also had its problems. It has reduced its workforce by at least 3%, up to 2,900 jobs in the United States and Europe. It says that its business has been negatively affected by consumers' increased use of digital photography. The recorded music industry has also been transformed by companies such as Napster, which have enabled listeners to sell and swipe music over the internet. Even with fines and legal challenges and efforts to put internet-based music sharing out of business, an obvious trend that so overwhelmingly benefits the public will continue. Smart companies change with the times. They don't resist inevitable market shifts. They capitalize on them. I'm sure you now realize just how vulnerable some organizations may be to a major shift in their external market. By now, even if you doubted the value of knowing about synchronization to begin with, you should probably realize that synchronization is the key to success in any organization. But to emphasize how pervasive synchronization is, think of it on a more personal, consumer level. Try to remember the style of clothes that people wore 5 or 10 years ago. Do they look like the styles being advertised and worn today? Probably not. Sure, some styles are timeless, but most change from year to year. And most people want to keep up with the times. Now, imagine a clothing store that thought it could stay in business year after year by selling the same old style, by refusing to change. Certainly, some people would be nostalgic for the good old look, but that usually comes after a style has been out of fashion for many years. And the people who like old clothes like that are few and far between. Styles come in and fade out, but they never come back exactly the same way. Obviously, stores that refuse to stock new fashions will probably go out of business. The same is true for popular music. Singers and bands come and go. Even the most popular groups eventually lose their audiences, unless they keep up with the times and changing tastes. They have to keep reinventing themselves. They have to keep listening to what audiences want to hear. Otherwise, they'll be singing only for themselves. Car manufacturers change their existing model designs, introduce altogether new ones, and discontinue some, depending upon how they synchronize their marketing strategies with the needs of potential buyers and the realities of the marketplace. Synchronization is especially challenging for companies that depend significantly upon external forces over which they appear to have little or no control, like the cost of gasoline. In countries in which gasoline prices are high, cars are typically smaller, have smaller engines, and greater fuel efficiency. Until 1973, gasoline in the United States was cheap. Then, oil-producing countries increased their prices substantially. Eventually, consumers started buying smaller, imported vehicles that were more efficient than gas-guzzling domestic models. So, U.S. car manufacturers began to lose market share. Then, they began to build their own smaller cars. But then, as prices stabilized, U.S. consumers began buying larger and larger vehicles. Today, heavy, gas-guzzling SUVs, really trucks, are everywhere in the United States, even though gas prices fluctuate. When the price of gas gets too high, or a new consumer fad for a different class of vehicles emerges, car manufacturers will synchronize their production to reflect what consumers are willing to buy. Some companies will be ahead of the curve. Some companies will be behind it. Really smart vehicle manufacturing companies are finally looking for ways to break out of the cycle of high and low gas prices. They are building hybrid cars that are battery-powered and gasoline-powered. They are exploring the use of alternative energy, like hydrogen, in consumer vehicles. They know that achieving independence from fossil fuels is the wave of the future. And now for question 5. How well does your organization look for new solutions to old problems? As before, rate it from 1 to 5, 5 being the best. How well did your organization rate on all 5 questions? Did you give it only a 5, a 25, or something in between? Were you surprised at the score? By now, you should see clearly that every organization is in danger of becoming a dinosaur. The sad truth is that most of the time, the seeds of future failure are being sown today, right before our eyes, without our realizing it. Of course, today's program is about how to prevent that from happening to you and your organization. So, think back to some of the examples of synchronization and the lack of synchronization that I've given you. Kraft Foods, Polaroid, Kodak, the recorded music industry. Now, think of what happened in those examples as a large circle with two smaller circles inside it. Circle 1 is the broad environment outside the organization, filled with the major trends and forces affecting craft and others. Circle 2 is the narrower outside environment that specifically represents trends and forces specific to a given organization or industry. Circle 3 is the environment inside an organization. In a few minutes, I will show you how you can integrate those 3 circles so that your organization becomes dynamically synchronized. But first, let's talk about the importance of synchronization. Among other things, I'd like to know why you think most organizations fail to become synchronized. I look forward to answering your questions and talking with you.
Let's begin with our first question-answer session. We will try to answer as many questions as possible. Therefore, we ask that only one question be asked per phone call and that these questions be as brief as possible. You may call the studio directly at the phone numbers or fax which appear on your screen. We remind you to make your phone calls at a distance from the monitor to avoid feedback. Our first question today comes to us from Tecamac, Mexico, the Universidad Tecnológico de Tecamac. Hello, good morning.
Buenos días. This is Professor Rubén Chávez from the University of Tecamac, and I would like to say hello. And my question is the following. What should be the traits of those who are in charge of synchronization in an educational environment? That's my question.
Okay.
Well, the first trait that a person needs to have is that they have to have an open mind. You would think that that would be a characteristic of educators, both educators and students, but that is not typically the case. So it's an open mind, a not only willingness, but an obsession, a compulsion to find out what is new and different, and an ability to assess information. In today's world, we have an abundance of information, but critical analysis is what people need, and then people have to be willing and able to implement the information that they get. That takes a lot. People are afraid to change. Those are the basic skills.
Okay, very good. Our next caller is from Cuba, from Havana, Siena Internet. Come in, please. Welcome. Buenos días.
Good morning to everyone. Our question, in terms of the accelerated development in synchronization in companies and in industry and the government, what should we take into account to be able to predict and forecast these tendencies in the education environment and also in the business environment? Thank you.
All right, so your crystal ball.
My crystal ball. Well, as you will find out more in the next segment, I will give you actually a recipe for how to determine what your future looks like, not only in business specifically or in education, but how you can keep your finger on the pulse of the future. However, I will say briefly at this point that what you need to do is be alert to emerging trends, and as a general characteristic, you must always proceed from the outside of your organization in. In other words, to take the example that we had at the very beginning and those that have happened during this segment, if you stop looking, if you are a Kraft Foods or a Nestle's Foods, and you think the future is going to be just like the present, you're wrong. You must always be out there saying, what's coming up and how quickly or slowly do I need to embrace it?
So no rear-view mirror view of the world, huh?
No, and most people do run their lives and their businesses through the rear-view mirror.
Very good. Our next caller comes to us from Puebla, Mexico, from Instituto Tecnológico Superior de la Sierra Norte de Puebla. Please come in. Welcome.
Sí, buenas tardes.
Buenos días.
Estamos hablando de sincronización.
We're talking about synchronization, and this has to do with creating technical and scientific research centers. But this also has economic and social factors as well. So my question is, what is your vision in terms of Latin America in this sense? You're talking about synchronization, and what I'm setting forth is that we need scientific and technological research centers to implement this. And what is your perspective in terms of Latin America?
Okay. Well, I never presume to